Welcome to the Real Advisor Podcast, TRAP, Trap. Please follow us and join in the conversation on Twitter @Advisor Podcast, where you can suggest ideas and themes you'd like the Trap team to discuss. Also remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave a 6 out of 5-star review on iTunes. Doing all this really helps us, which means we can do more to help you. Now let's head over to the studio for the latest pile of Trap.
Yes, indeed, dear Trappists. Welcome back to what many people are calling episode 19 of the Real Advisor Podcast, TRAP, Trap. My name is Nick Lincoln, and joining me as ever are the three other horsemen of the apocalypse, Andy Hart, Carl the Voice Widger, and Alan the Storyteller Smith. Now, gentlemen, we have a show packed full of absolutely nothing. So let's start unpacking it straight away. And I think we'll do as we normally do. We'll go to Mr. Hart to read out in his quintessentially upbeat tempo and style 3 more reviews of Trap.
Yeah, over to me. The reviews are still coming in. It's fantastic. We've got so many reviews, so please do keep them coming in, and I'll read them out on the show. First up, we have the review from Two Combs, compulsory and entertaining 5 stars. A totally refreshing podcast aimed squarely at proper financial planners. No punches held, and thank goodness for that. Let the truth out. Next up is Toby Hines, who I've met in person. I think a few other people on the call have. Golden nuggets in every episode, 5 stars. As a relatively new advisor with a real passion for full fat planning, I'm finding the content of this podcast invaluable. Knowledgeable, experienced guys doing the job for the right reasons and doing it in the right way. There are always a few nuggets that I take from into my own work. Finally, it's from Duncan Go. Essential 5 stars. Thanks, guys, for a great podcast and essential for all financial advisors. Back to you, Lick Ninken.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And we do appreciate those reviews. They do mean an awful lot. And it's not just the fact we're getting these lovely reviews in terms of the rating, but the time people are taking to actually craft a little story about how the pod is helping them and so forth. I mean, we all really appreciate it. So thank you so much for doing that. Yeah. Okay, so some topical tidbits just to put a sort of timestamp on episode 19. In the show notes, I did ask who this was from, and no one's come back to me. There's a thing about the ONS people, population, and community. Does someone want to talk about that?
Who put
this
that
is why I love the preparation. Where you guys just go that extra mile. It's just classic.
Who posted that link? It wasn't me.
No idea.
Next, move on.
It definitely wasn't me because it was a UK government link. So I'm definitely not guilty.
It's you, Nick.
Somebody is telling me a lie.
It's you, Nick.
I'm going to look at it quickly now. Living longer. No, I don't think it is, mate.
Anyway,
right,
don't worry.
Let's go on to Carl and the real deal. Please, Carl, say something.
The real deal was on last week in a place called Goffs, just outside Dublin, right? And the reason I wanted to mention it was great to be back at an event where people were meeting people, but more importantly, way more importantly, it was an event for kind of business owners by business owners with stories from business owners, and you just can't, you can't beat hearing from people who've been there and done that.
Sorry, Carl, what actually is it then?
So it's a conference whereby it's run by a bunch of accountants called Fitzgerald Power and a corporate finance house called Renatus. And they basically just get a bunch of successful entrepreneurs, business owners to tell their stories. And you have tons and tons of great people. And all of the I suppose, business people who are serious about business in the wider Dublin area are at it. And it was just something that, it was just great to be back out there and talking to people, and really well run. But my big point here is I love hearing stories from people who have been there and done that. And aren't there so many, I know you call them knacks in our industry, Nick, and some are obviously very, very good at what they do, but you just can't beat hearing from people who've had experience. And that was the reason I wanted to put it in there.
Lovely. Yeah, I think we all echo that. So let's just... this is quite interesting. I think this is a new venture for us. On the 5th of June, one of the Trap Pack is not able to make the recording. That's Carl. So we are going to have a guest host on that show. So in the so-called show notes, there is a link. If you want to be considered to be a guest host, the recording takes place on the 5th of June. Click on the link in the show notes, submit your details. You'll have to be competent with a microphone, competent with the camera. And
not really, because none of us are.
As good as us.
Don't dispel the myth, mate. They don't know this.
Okay.
Click on the link there. How are we going to choose who is going to be? I don't know. We might just do it by a random thing, but the link is in there. We want a 4th for the 5th of June, so please do step up. We've already got double-digit number of people who want to do it. Just add yourself to the list, and somehow, by fair means or foul, we'll pick who that person's going to be and give you notice. And we'll walk you through. I will walk you through the software, so you're not just coming in cold to record the episode. It's episode
Over 10
21.
people have already applied, Nick.
They have, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Nick won't tell us who they are.
So we've got enough.
I've shared the document with you.
We've got enough standby people if one of us is unavailable. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, it will be.
Yeah, but a hopper of people who've done it. Yeah.
Cool. Or if one of us gets fired by the other 3. Andy.
Well, I've got 40% of the shares, haven't I?
Oh, God. Right, come on, order. So we've been
40%.
shortlisted for an award. Somebody put in there, we've been shortlisted for an award. Talk about it, because I'm not going to. Who was it? Come on.
I think that was Alan.
Well, put it in. I mean, we're aware of it, aren't they? There's an organisation in the UK, what's it called? Next Gen Planners.
Yeah.
Which I think, well, Andy, are you active in it? You're a member of, but
I'm a member of it.
He's too old, isn't he?
You would think so. He's the oldest member of Next Gen Planners.
No,
but
Next Gen.
I understand it's not about age.
It's a mindset.
It's a mindset. It's not an age thing. But surprisingly, it's generally younger people. So surprisingly, we were shortlisted. They have an annual, I guess, a conference, and within the conference, there's a range of awards. And much to I think all our surprise, we saw that posted on Twitter and LinkedIn last week, that we've been shortlisted. There's a number of other, which would appear to be very good podcasts for the financial planning profession, and we are in that little list. So if any of our listeners, any of the Trappists listening into this, I don't know what the criteria is. I don't know how they're going to choose who the winner is. Is it just a judging panel who decides what the best podcast is, or what the specific decision criteria is? But if anyone's listening to this and want to give them a nudge, by all means, post something on social media, give us a shout out, and give the judges something to think about, because it would be quite nice to win, I must say. Andy?
Yeah, just on that, Next Gen is an awesome organisation. They're doing great work. I've been a member of them for years. I think I've been to every conference that they've had. So I'll be going to this conference again. It is my number one piece of advice to people just getting into this business that are a little bit sort of isolated or a little bit unsure who to speak to and what to do. So I recommend you join Next Gen Planners immediately. I think they've got like a free version and a paid version. I'm on the paid version, but I don't quite know what the difference is. But yeah, huge shout out to those guys and girls at Next Gen. They're doing some good work. Anyone else?
Excellent stuff. So in a similar kind of vein to getting some kudos and being awarded, being nominated for an award, we were mentioned by one of the top podcast people in the world, actually, Steven Bartlett. Alan, I believe you posted a tweet with a list of the rankings, and we sort of came in 15 with people like Steven Bartlett's show and Professor Scott Galloway and all these other luminaries, and Steven Bartlett sort of picked up on your tweet.
Well, exactly. I posted that because I never see. I think all of us are we're pleasantly surprised by the success of this podcast, and we do look stunned, shocked. But for the Real Advisor podcast to be listed, and there are, as we know, there are charts, and I think the criteria for how you appear in charts is a bit of a mystery. No one really quite knows. It's not just downloads; it's to do with reviews and feedback and how long people listen to the
posting and it's weird.
all that sort of stuff. But nevertheless, we find ourselves now. Nick, you and I were speaking about this recently in terms of the category, because this isn't a personal finance podcast specifically. It's more designed for people who are in profession and people who've got financial planning businesses or aspirations to have it. So we find ourselves, yes, we're in the broad business category, which pretty much everyone is in, but the sort of subset is entrepreneurship, the entrepreneur category, which is which a lot of it, the conversations is around. And that category, I know there are literally thousands and thousands of podcasts that fit into that entrepreneur category. And yeah, I mean, I just happened to look at it maybe once a week, and I found that we were number 15 in the UK podcast charts under entrepreneur. And you're right. So Steven Bartlett's The Diary of a CEO. There's always number one. That's a huge business. He's publishing a podcast at least twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. When I listened to it the other day, he's got 30 full-time staff, 30 full-time. That's a real business.
Just on the podcast?
Just on the podcast.
Diary of CEO, wow.
Just on the podcast. Diary of CEO, 30 full-time staff. So, and then, people like, Professor Scott Galloway and Tim Ferriss and Alex Hormozy. We've mentioned this before. These are all the top podcasts in the world. They've got businesses that sit behind it. They are publishing 2 or 3 episodes per week. And us jokers pitch up, doing it ourselves, 1 episode every 2 weeks. No budget, no nothing.
Absolute shambles.
And just to be on the same page as those guys is amazing, frankly. So I posted that on Twitter. I tagged Steven Bartlett, and he did. He gave us a shout out. He replied, said, well done, congratulations, and he said, just keep going, because the main success criteria for this is consistency. You just got to keep going. So that was a nice little boost for us to remind ourselves, just keep going. Thank you, Mr. Bartlett.
Mr. Widger, your hand was raised.
Yeah, look to Next Gen. Thanks so much. That was a lovely surprise to Steven Bartlett's intern for replying to Alan's tweet. Right, that was also lovely. The big thing for me was last week. We all got an email from the podcast host people. I forget even their names. Right? Buzzsprout. Yeah, that we have 25,000 downloads. So that for me is the success. We can go on any charts or anything like that. But for me, that means there are financial advisors out there in Ireland, the UK, and the US, and probably South Africa and further afield who are actually listening to this. Clearly, not everybody is going to agree with everything we say. We don't even agree with each other. But thank you so much to everybody who tunes in. And it is nice. There's no point in saying otherwise. It is nice to bump into people who say, "Oh, I listened to the podcast and I thought that was great," or I disagreed with that. It feels like we're having an impact. So thank you to everybody who has downloaded an episode so far, and please do keep doing so.
Indeed. Okay, that's lovely. That's enough. That's enough about us. Let's go on to the next thing on the topical tidbits: annual fees and costs disclosure. Again, Mr. Smith, I think that was put in by you.
Yeah, I'm chucking this out just for general debate and discussion. I think often in this podcast and in our topical tidbits, we just share things that have happened to us and our businesses in recent days and weeks, just to see if there's any other traction with anyone else. We're in the process of hopefully taking on a new sort of ideal fit prospective client, and we're just looking through. There's a colleague of mine that shared this with me, and looking through all the information that they have been provided by their existing advisor. And I won't name the existing advisor. I don't think it's in anyone's interest to do so, because I think it's kind of commonplace. But large national brand, they get a full, detailed, documented annual report, which is sort of similar. It's very nice and shiny and professional looking, similar to the sort of stuff that we do and we're required to do for clients. But there is absolutely zero reference to fees and charges disclosure. Now, my understanding of the regulatory regime in the UK is that you are compelled to give a full detailed breakdown of all fees and costs, both in monetary terms and in pounds and pence, at least once a year to your client. And what I've discovered since we had a look at this, and there's nothing, and the client said, this is all I've ever got, this is everything I get from my existing advisor every year. And then that sort of spurred a few other conversations. And it seems that the rules are being interpreted entirely differently, because I tell you, we probably go too far, I think, on reflection with our fees and disclosure documents. And if there's ever a change or a client asks for some income withdrawals or there's a small top up or anything at all, we go again and we continue to sort of put fees and costs and charges and repeat ourselves multiple times to clients. I'm not sure if it's of great value to clients, but the difference between that and having zero disclosure at all is quite marked. And I'm just wondering if anyone else has got any views or their own experiences, and what do you guys do, and also the view from Ireland. But Andy, what's your take on fees and charges disclosure on an annualized basis?
I think you explained it quite well. I think the platforms have to do it anyway. So the bulk of my assets are on, a decent platform, and that's done. We disclose it. You're right, pounds and pence in every regulated piece of work that we do. I think overloading clients with fee information is detrimental, because one of our jobs is to remove their financial anxiety and not add to it. But zero disclosure at the same time is also not of use. And even the disclosure we see is sometimes not full disclosure. I have seen DFMs have like a 28-page report and Section 9's about fees, and honestly, it's blank. I go to Section 9 and it's blank. Or they might say we charge 1% plus VAT and leave it as that. Again, it's just, it's a little bit murky.
And you know, so what I have seen as well is sometimes they'll say fees and charges disclosure for full information.
Websites, yeah.
Go to this website, or the one that I saw, someone else posted this on Twitter last week, I think, and it was actually, get another big brand name, which said, phone this number, 0850 to get details. I mean, again, just the friction and the barriers that are in place, because how many people are going to actually phone a number and get, and even understand once they have, if indeed that they get through. So it feels to me, and I agree, there is a balance. You should disclose your fees and charges, but I think we, as I say, gone too far. As a colleague of mine said the other day, imagine that you got a full disclosure on owning a car right now. Every month, or every quarter, every year, you depreciation on your car, the petrol you put in it, everything. This is all the you would never own a car. You'd say this is just too expensive. But you're right. But there's a balance. It just seems to me that there are some organisations just kind of playing a little bit fast and loose with the rules and just doing as little as they can, whilst the rest of us, good guys, are doing the right thing. And I must admit, it doesn't augur well to me in terms of the consumer duty rules, which are about to be enacted in this country in July this year, I believe. And I just think it's going to be more of the same. We'll be sort of belt and braces, doing everything we're supposed to do, and others will just kind of broadly ignore it. Carl, what are the rules over in Ireland in terms of ongoing fees and charges disclosure? Do you have to do it every year?
Do we have to do it every year? So it's in the statements, Alan, that they get from the provider, so the platform provider or whatever. Yeah, so it is there. I think there's one massive difference, though, at the outset, which I didn't realize until we had this discussion offline last week, which was you guys need to say in pounds and pence what this fee equals.
Yeah.
And there are so many people hiding behind little itsy bitsy small percentages, right? Trying to get away with that. So I think that's a big, massive difference. It's grand telling a client, it's 0.5% of your million quid as opposed to $5,000 gone every year. We're going to take $5,000. So I think that is a big difference. But do we, a little bit like what you said, Alan, if there's kind of top ups or anything like that, we have to go again, right? And tell them again.
Yep.
But we have I suppose, look, you've heard me saying it a million times, right? We're trying to get ready here for RDR, which we're bloody well hoping might be brought in at some stage. So we remind, and they'll also see that I was deeply uncomfortable with the content of some of today's podcast, owing to the Irish versus UK cultural differences. In case people think that I kind of think these things through, at the end of Alan's first segment, he said, and I'd be interested to get the view from across the sea in Ireland. And I went, oh, Jesus, I haven't listened to a word he's been saying. So I had to listen very intently to what Andy replied. Thankfully, Alan then jumped in again. I went, okay, I know what they're talking about.
Well done, Carl.
Thanks for paying attention, Carl.
Yeah. So I think we've a lot of work done on this. We really have. We've come from a very, very low bar, but I think we're coming good on it, and we just need to bring in RDR is the final piece for me. Yeah.
Nick, any comments?
I concur with that. It does seem that some brands just don't obfuscate. They'll just give clients everything but the hard costs. But you know what? I think that plays in our favour, because if we're up, I know we are, and I know the Trappists will be. If you're up front and direct with the fees, and you're saying to a potential customer, client, you're saying to a prospect, these are our fees in percentage terms, pounds and pence. This is what you get for it. I'm very happy to share that with you. You're inferring that it's a shame your existing advisor doesn't. It's just a way of separating you. I think it can't hurt. In that sense, it's got to augur well for the advisor that does come up front with the fees, saying this is what we're going to charge. This is what you're going to get. And And how do you feel about your existing advisor or your existing DFM never telling you what the fees are? You don't know what you're paying them, and we're quite happy to tell you what we're paying. So now you can make a proper value judgment, Mr. Prospect, Mrs. Prospect. Andy?
I am obviously Nick Murray trained, and I do like the saying, I charge percentages ad valorem. I charge you 1% a year to help you avoid the mistakes which cost multiples of 1% a year, and that is the reality of it. It's very hard to say that in monetary terms, but I still disclose both. But when I talk about
Nick Murray uses the phrase, he says, "I charge you a cent on the dollar, or a penny in the pound."
Yeah,
sounds very nice. Actually, sounds
there's various ways to
practically
slice,
free
to slice and dice it. But then I do the grand total. So the platform's charging you 0.2, 0.3. The fund manager's charging you 0.3. I'm charging you whatever. The grand total is whatever. I know I can put that into monetary terms and they can work it out themselves. But I'm also okay with it being mentioned in percentages. Yes, we need to ram it down their throat about 14 different places every single year. Where are we getting with this? Us sending them a video screaming at them a monetary number, and they've got to say yes, I proceed.
Yeah, they got to consent.
Here's a loon video. 8,475 quid this year. Are you okay to proceed next year?
I think channeling my inner Andy, I've got quite a good fees page on my website, and I think I put quite a bit of time into doing it, and I break it down. So that, as Andy mentioned, there are 3 elements. There's my fee, there's the platform fee, there's the investment fee. 3 elements, and typically, if you invested X amount, it would be this amount. People can see it. It's just you don't have. So it's, yes, and I'm one of those advisors who does put their fees on their website, but I don't make a big song and dance about it. But it's there for people if they want to have a look. Doesn't make me better than anybody else. Doesn't make me worse than anybody else. Right. I think we've done that sufficient justice. So 2 episodes ago, episode 17, I spoke about how the UK stock market, in terms of capitalization, or in global terms, is just shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. It was double digits 20 years ago. I think it was 12% of the world market cap. It's now just above 4%. And this week I saw a tweet from a respected financial journalist, one of the better financial journalists, Merrin Somerset Webb, and she was tweeting about a UK tech firm. I can't remember the name of it, sorry, but it's decided to go and list in the USA rather than list here. And Somerset Webb said, imagine you had a firm to list. You can do it in the UK, get half the price on listing, get half the CEO's salary, spend most of your time talking to compliance, and then get chucked off your own board after 9 years. Or you can list in the US. We need reform now. So there's obviously a problem with entrepreneurship in this country and a complete disregard for the private sector and for business. And it's starting now to impact. It really is starting to impact. Don't need any comments from you guys unless you've got something to add. We can move on to the next thing. Okie dokie. And what else? Yes, just out of nothing, I saw a good website, an American website. It's Kindness Financial Planning, run by a guy called Elliot Apple, and he's a virtual financial planner. So for those of us who are moving to a virtual world or near virtual world, he's got this great website. There'll be a link to it in the so-called show notes. Just talk, and it's client-facing, saying why you should use a virtual financial planner and why you shouldn't, and how I work. And of course, being American, it's done to the nth degree, very slick. So if you're thinking about doing that and being able to communicate the merits and the disadvantages of being a virtual financial planner to your target audience, I suggest you have a look at his website. And there's nothing new under the sun. Take some ideas from that. Now, Andy, you've had a love fest, haven't you, the last few days? Go on, Berkshire Hathaway. Let's do it.
He loves it.
So this is the Warren Buffett's annual general meeting in Omaha, Nebraska. It was live streamed on the 6th of May. A good friend of mine, Jimmy Joseph, went out there, so he's sending me some photos whilst he was there. I put it in the topical tidbits, but it's sort of culture corner. I watch this every year. It's about 6 hours long. There's a morning session and an afternoon session, and I've also in the show notes put the link to the annual general meetings going back till 1994, and I have listened to all of them, and they're about 6 hours long, each one of them. So if you're as sad as me and want to overload on Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, I do recommend checking out this podcast feed that is absolutely awesome. My next topical tidbit is...
Sorry, mate, just before we go on from that, did you say Jimmy Joseph went out there for it?
Yeah, Jimmy Joseph went out there. Yeah, he was in Omaha,
just for
Nebraska.
That, just to Omaha.
Hang on, I thought you had to be a shareholder. Is he a shareholder?
There's a story about that, Alan. Yes, you have to be a shareholder, and I think at the moment the A-class shares are 400,000 each.
Yeah,
I've not given away Jimmy Joseph's net worth because if you're a B-class shareholder now, which is I think 1/20th of that, you also have a ticket to the AGM. I think he was going prior to COVID, and it's been nudged on since then. I think they've had 2 or 3 virtual meetings, and then he's gone out there. And he's bringing me back some See's candy, if anyone knows anything about Buffett. I'm very excited to be eating that.
You might. I watched about an hour and a half of it at the weekend when it was on, and the overriding thing for me is you've got Buffett is 92 and Munger is 99. And they were sharp as a tack, both of them. Both of them, just
it's absolutely
and just but they're such a brilliant double act. They're funny. They actually sort of bounce off each other. Yeah. And he said something at the beginning, doesn't it? Because obviously it was on the day of putting a timestamp on this of the coronation, King Charles, and Buffett says we have our own King Charles here. Look at Charlie Munger. Got the audience laughing along.
Yeah, he's basically like, apparently we've got an event clash going on in the UK.
Yeah.
Yeah, a bit of an event clash. I mean, they'd never mentioned any other event apart from that, which is quite interesting. Yeah, I've listened to the whole morning session, 3 hours, and I'll be going through the afternoon session. Mainly it's questions from the audience, and the questions are getting better and better every year. They were asking them this year about AI. That was quite interesting, and a couple of other things. But yeah, going back to the whole sort of back catalogue to 1994 on a podcast feed is absolutely brilliant. So then you go through all the different stages, like the tech crisis, the financial crisis, and then COVID, all the things that we've gone through. Yeah, absolutely brilliant, superb. So yeah, do check out certainly the latest one, and then also if you like them, check out the back catalogue. A couple of other quick updates. The Hum conferences are selling well. South Africa, a huge chunk have gone. I think we've got about another 100 left tickets, so please do buy one there. We've got Bruce Whitfield, who's a big speaker in South Africa, and we've got our very own Alan Smith making the trip out to Cape Town, leaving Paddington to put on a good show in
Kilburn South.
Yeah.
If you tell me what I should talk about, that would be good. But
yeah, we'll get onto that.
No ideas.
And then London is selling incredibly well. I've got 300 tickets to sell, and I'm pretty much at about 260. The headline speakers there are Rory Sutherland, and my good friend Simon Bucknell is the UK's public speaking champion, so he'll be doing a good show. And then final other thing, topical tidbit, I went to Lisbon last weekend. Lisbon is now pretty much my favourite European city. Rome is a close second, but yeah, Lisbon is fantastic. And I'm going to be going to Porto as my next European trip, which I've heard is potentially better than Lisbon, which I'll be the judge. That's it, really. Back to you, boss.
Great stuff. Thanks, guys. So we're 29 minutes into this rambling disaster. So I think it's time that we consider moving on to the meat and potatoes. And those are potatoes being peeled in the background. I know this causes some consternation for some of the Trap Pack. And the meat and potatoes, Mr. Smith, let's hand over to you on the by the way, this if we go on for a long time, Trappists, with this, we might split this over 2 episodes or so, because this is a big subject, essentially the client journey. Mr. Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. We've got a project on in our firm at the moment, which is causing me to focus and sort of relook at some of the things that we do, because the world has changed significantly since we started the business. Every business, whether it knows it or not, whether it's kind of thought through or whether it just happens by accident, has a new client process, whatever way you want to describe it. How you engage with a potential client when they first make contact with you, a meeting or a series of meetings, and we're all doing a variation on a theme. I don't think anyone's doing anything dramatically different, but I'd like to, and it's a kind of a follow-up to some degree on the conversation that we had last episode, which was a focus on critical non-essentials. I'm really trying to get into the weeds somewhat and hopefully offering some insights, some thoughts, and some experience to the listeners about a good kind of new client. I don't like the word, but there's no better word, but onboarding new clients, how you take new prospective clients through your journey, how you work out whether they are a good fit or not, how you politely disengage if they aren't a good fit, and how you take clients on. So some years ago, I'll tell you just a brief story, which will take you back. Sorry, Andy, we're going to say something before I go through to this. No? Put your hand up.
Grab yourself a drink, a very long drink. It's story time with Alan Smith.
I couldn't have teed you up any better. Come on. I've always been interested. I've always been curious about what I perceive to be best practice. What are the better and the best firms who do what we do in the UK and around the world? What are they doing? What can we learn from? I think that's one of the reasons that we're all, or most of us, are fans or followers of Nick Murray. Nick Murray seems to, show best practice and good examples of how to do good things. And in that vein, in 2008-9, around that time, I've came across a firm. I think I have mentioned them before, one of the previous episodes, but there was a firm called CEG Worldwide in the US who were offering coaching consulting courses, what they refer to as being for the elite financial advisors or elite wealth advisors of the world. And the backstory of this, the founder of this organization was a guy called John Bowen, who himself was historically a financial planner, and started off relatively humbly and then grew his business and grew the firm. And he was in the West Coast of America. He was based in sort of Northern California. He merged with a firm in Los Angeles, and he disclosed, and it was all public information, he was happy to share it. He's disclosed that their clients included Tom Cruise, Oprah Winfrey, David Letterman, some of the biggest, American football stars, basketball stars, all that sort of stuff. And he said, we got to a point where our minimum entry level to be a client was $25 million. So I thought, I'm going to listen to this guy. If he knows how to grow a business like that, he must know what he's talking about. Because he eventually sold his practice, sold his business, obviously had more money than he could count or ever needed, and created this consulting coaching business called CEG Worldwide. And I got to the point where I was going to travel out. They had this, ran for a year. You go for a quarterly meeting in San Diego, I think it was. And I was all ready to go buy my ticket and travel out there once a quarter to learn from these people. And lo and behold, through a partnership they'd agreed with Dimensional Fund Advisors, they came to the UK. And they ran what would be a 1 year program. They ran it for a week. So 5 days, pretty intensive. And there's a number of people that are still in our financial planning community today that were on that same course. I believe it's the only time they ever came to the UK. And it was very profound, and it was very kind of life-changing and business-changing for my company, because we adopted so many of the practices that went on that they shared with, because they said, this is what the best firms in the world do. So I'm a big believer in replicating, finding best practice and just copying it rather than trying to invent it myself. So in terms of when you first meet with a client, assuming that they meet your criteria and you go into what is generically known as a discovery meeting. So this became quite interesting because they said this was the key to everything. So they have a 62 question discovery meeting process. And I'm sure Nick is probably looking and eyes rolling right now. I don't know. But they effectively gave us a script, and we just started doing it, and it was quite different. And maybe a lot of these things are adopted now, but I think a lot of this, most people still don't go through this, but they start a question, they start talking about the 7 key subjects they talk about, right? So the opening, this is the first meeting. They would always aim for, if it's a couple, partners, husband and wife, partners, spouses, and they would always do things that very specifically identify who is the least financially dominant partner. So you ask, who takes care of the family finances? Usually, not always, usually it's the man. So they would turn to the least dominant, so it would be the woman in this case. And they'll start asking questions. And they start asking what they call values questions. And they do ask questions like, what was money like growing up in your childhood? What does money mean to you? And they say things like, tell me your story. Tell me. Now, and then they go through a whole range of questions across 7 key subjects. As I say, 62 different questions. Some of the questions, frankly, were bizarre, and we didn't adopt all of them. I mean, they, for example, they say, do you have any pets? They want to know, do you have any pets? They want to know, one of the questions, because they would
You mean potentially exempt transfers?
No. I mean, goldfish, horses, dogs, cats. But they said there's an impact because some people, if you had, and some of the sort of very high net worth people had horses and stables of horses, or some people, the dog was the part of the family. So it was all it was really kind of out there and very kind of California for a bit. And so we had to apply our own kind of almost sort of UKify it to some extent. But as a result of, you go through this, and the meetings would take 2.5 to 3 hours, very pretty, quite intensive. We'd record the meeting, and you come away with that with what they called a total client profile, which is effectively a mind map. And if you can get the client's entire life on one page across their values, their goals, their important relationships, their interests, their hobbies, and it's not until you're probably an hour into the conversation you're even talking about money. And I thought that was quite interesting. And you know what? So we ran that for many years, really successful. People liked it. And I've just realized, like a lot of things in life, we stopped doing it to the same degree. It was so successful that we stopped doing it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the processes. So we've got a bit of a refresh going on right now. Does it still make sense? Should we go back to it? Should we freshen this up a bit? Because I think we just diluted it, and we kind of short-circuited it a little bit. But that was quite a dramatic change to anything that we were doing before that, which was more traditional IFA fact-finding, which went straight into assets, liabilities, income, expenditure. This was a much higher level, and it was much more long-winded, I suppose, but it didn't half get engagement with the right prospects and the right clients. So throw that out to anyone who'd like to comment in terms of that first kind of discovery, fact find, whatever you want to call it, meeting. Who's got any thoughts you'd like to share on that?
I'll jump in. That was that really interesting stuff, Alan. And look, do you know what? The last bit you just said there, that you had something that was really working, and then the business is kind of maybe slacked off, and that's just human nature, isn't it? That we're all guilty of doing that, and I think that's the beautiful time to do a review, to go back and say, okay, we're not doing that the way we used to do it. We do it differently. I'm not sure I've ever done a discovery meeting that went over, say, an hour and a half. So clearly there's an awful lot more depth in what you're talking about doing. But then again, do I think that we don't have good profiles in our heads and good relationships built up with our clients after the initial discovery piece? I think we do, right? So I'm not sure we need to extend it anymore. Where we've come to, Alan, on this is we've a getting to know you questionnaire, which is basically like your old fact find, but we've developed that. It's an online version. When you click, it's a hidden page on our website. So we send that out to anybody who's looking to get a financial plan. Starts off with a letter from me or a message from me as to here's, we do it differently, and we're going to answer the questions like, are we going to be okay? And we're going to try and deliver a plan whereby it's designed around your goals, dreams, and aspirations, etc. And then we go through it. So we start off with some of the softer questions, your first memories of money, that kind of stuff. And then we get into tell us about your assets and liabilities. We do. There's no point in saying otherwise. And then we try and finish with some of the softer questions. Now, I think some of the softer stuff at the end are really, really insightful for us. One question. If in 12 months' time you were to review this relationship, what would success look like? And then in 3 years' time, same question. What's your experience of financial advisors before? So you're getting an insight into, what their expectations are and what their experiences are already. I saw something on Twitter recently from our American FinTwit friends about, you don't really ask people about their goals, do you? That's so twee, and that's so, well, we do, right? Because we need to know. And
Yeah.
it's like, I'm not embarrassed ever to say, we have 3 words, right? So 3 words that we drive home, and I always say to the guys, if you're not using these 3 words several times in the initial couple of meetings, it's a fail. Goals, dreams, aspirations. Keep using them, so that the client, will feel that this is different. Now, I had I did one on last Friday in our Dublin office with Simon Ross, our financial planner in Dublin. And we opened the meeting to try and give the client a sense of this is going to be different with, what's the video? Andrew, you did it for us. It's absolutely amazing. Your life is a journey or something like that. And it's about living your best life. So I said, look, we're different than what you've ever experienced. This meeting is going to be different. It's going to be around your goals, dreams, and aspirations. To set the tone of that, can we watch a video together? I think it's 2.5 minutes. I love it. I've told you all so many times I love it. It's so to try and, get away from the private bank. You're coming in here to feel stupid, to be afraid to ask questions, all of that kind of stuff. It's how can we change the tone entirely? So that's how we do it.
Can I want to just come back on that and share an experience that we learned, because we adopted the CEG thing and just went straight into it and it worked, because that you asked their advice because it was so dramatically different to open conversations with, tell me about your background, tell me about what was your family life growing up. It was significantly different to what we've done before. And their view was just do it. Don't mess around. Don't try to do a watered down version and just go straight into it. And you'll learn from your feedback and you'll change it. And we had to change, because we were having, I remember it was like one dark, wintry Monday morning, early Monday morning. And this guy, very successful entrepreneur, and he just wanted to come in and he just wanted to review his finances. And there was no setting. We hadn't set it up in any way. And I remember I just thought, we're just going to carry on. Sat down with this guy and I just said, tell me, what was money like growing up? And he went, what are you on about? And I said, what does money mean to you? And he was just really incredulous. He thought, what the hell?
But Alan, worse than that is if you were like me, started off as the product seller. I know about pension, sure, right? And John is still a client of mine, right? Not sure if John listens to this, right? But John tells the story over a few points. And then one day, Carl arrived in and said, hey, John, what are your goals, dreams, and aspirations? And he went, fucking hell, there's something seriously gone wrong. Yeah.
He's like, Carl, have you been on a course or something? Have you seen
you've been reading again, haven't you? I've told you about that.
Or have you hit your head?
Yeah.
Andy. A funny story about that. I was doing a training session last week and there was a girl in the audience, a lady in the audience, and she's the daughter of a successful financial advisor who's been in the business for 30 years. And she was saying her father started off, insurance salesman, knocking on doors, and has gone through every iteration from sort of like Carl's story, like a lot of people's story. And now he's a pure financial planner, uses Voyant, all that sort of stuff. When he calls his clients that he's had for like 40 years and rings up, usually the wife picks up the phone and then she shouts to the husband, oh, it's blah, 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 the insurance salesman. I thought it was very funny. Like now he's like a lifestyle financial planner. Like, how could you possibly call him the insurance salesman? So that was the first thing.
Have you guys considered review? You know what I refer to as the George Kinder questions?
Oh. We have some of them in there, but like I think one of those questions, now correct me if I'm wrong, Alan, but is one of them like, what would you do if you're going to die in 3 months?
Yeah, you got 20. Yeah. 10 years left
along
to
those
live.
lines.
Yeah. Like 1 year left to live, 24 hours. They are quite powerful questions. I mean, I've been through the Kinder process.
That's irrelevant when you're trying to get to, in my view, that is irrelevant when you're trying to build a long-term partnership with people. However, if money was no issue, what would you do differently today? Now, I like that question, right? So, what should we be looking at? Are there things? There are too many people who have bucket lists, right? I actually could, because I knew we were going to talk about this. So we have this in our reception, right? It's just a bucket list book, right? And we're not expecting anyone to read it. We're just trying to set the tone of what happens in our office. And too many people have these bucket list items that they never get around to and all that, right? So are the stuff we can identify early on? Why aren't we doing that? You have loads of money in the bank. Why aren't you doing that? Just go and do it. So
yeah, but there's I think when you mentioned before the Twitter debate about goals and you shouldn't bother with that, I think it is nuanced because I think it can be quite a challenge. You pluck anyone off the street who's there. As we all know, those first meetings are, I'm thinking about retirement. I need to review my pension and all that sort of stuff. and you talk about what are your goals, I think is an immediately difficult question to ask, to answer. It's too vague.
Agreed.
It's too big. But what do you mean? Do you mean my goals today, tomorrow, this week, the rest of my life? I don't know. I think it's quite, in my experience, it's quite common for people to say, I don't really know.
Yeah,
and you sort of push a bucket list. Do you want to go and visit the Taj Mahal or see the whatever?
No. So look, really. I suppose experience leads you to, find ways around that. So the way I would do it is ask people about their family. So who's at home? Who the important people. And now we start talking about, I don't sit down there like a little bit, what are your goals? That's never going to work. It's big. Bring them on a journey nice and softly with you. And you will, they'll start, it will become apparent as opposed to you actually having to ask the questions.
Right. I got a question for you then on that. And this is where, again, we've maybe struggled a bit and could do this better. So if someone then articulates something, which is maybe a long-term goal or something they'd like to do or achieve within their life, how is that documented, captured, and then how do you hold them accountable later on? Again, full sort of confession. I think sometimes we've let some of them slip. We've recorded them at the time, but do we have a sort of
we put it in as an event into the cash flow plan?
All right,
and then you can move the.
I was going to say once Voyant gets introduced into the mix, that's where they become a little bit more future focused. But at first, we're planning decades ahead, and clients are just struggling to work out what they're doing at the weekend. That's the sort of joke, and then we rock up and say, what we're going to place on here. I think the following years that they go through the same process, back to Carl says, to sort of setting the tone, they then become more future focused the longer they work with you. That's what I've generally found, and they become more engaged in the whole process. Over to you, Nick.
Yeah, it's because client goals typically have money involved. There's a cost to them. So they will be in the financial plan and they will be on the timeline. And if the event is 5 years down the line, after they've been working with you for 4 years, you sit down with the client and say, well, next year, we're still doing this? Could we put money aside for it? This, whatever it is, this, it's a cliche thing, this fantastic one-off holiday to the Taj Mahal or whatever it was that we talked about 5 years ago. Well, it's coming up now. So, how do you find the booking process? Well, we haven't done it yet, Nick. We're going to, okay. Well, the money's there, right? And so I think it should come up organically as part of the annual planning meeting process, because it's in their financial plan as a cost, as an outgoing, and we're here to make sure that the money is there for those things when it's needed. That's really our role. Just look at the question side of things. My discovery meetings are normally like 15 seconds. But now it's virtual. I can just disengage the meeting. Yes, I use the 3-year question, for it to be a success. What in 3 years hence, what does success look like? I think that is a good question. I try and avoid the tree hugging stuff. And I think there's I don't know, maybe it's the cynical side of me. I think there's an awful lot of money has been spent on that kind of stuff. And I'm not sure it's totally appropriate. And maybe that's an American English psychological difference. And the other 2 questions I do ask, apart from the 3-year question, the other question, and Carl mentioned this one, is have you used a financial advisor before and what was the experience? And listen really carefully to that, whether it's negative or positive. Because if they say it, it's true. If you say it, it's conjecture. But if the client says it, it's true. So when you're following up that meeting with them, you say, okay, well, if they had a negative experience with an advisor because of X, Y, Z reasons, you in your follow-up email to the client or what have you, or your Loom, you say, and by the way, we take a lot of time and effort to make sure that we do this, this, and this, the exact opposite of their experience. And the third question I ask is, my clients are referred, so I will say to prospects, listen, you've come to me from Lucy and Graham. Tell me in your words what Lucy and Graham said I've done for them. And then they'll tell, oh, you talk about the graphs and it's sort of financial planning and cash flow, and you kind of sorted them out and put them on the straight and narrow. And again, because they're saying it, it carries a lot more resonance than if I say, I'm going to do a cash flow graph for you and put it on the straight and narrow, which will just go, over their heads in one ear and out the other. So,
but just clarify, because I think it sounds like all you guys do you send a link to a sort of a pre-meeting form for your prospective client to complete online. Andy, I know you've got a good version of that on your website.
Yeah, I've honed this over the years. So yeah, there's some boring information at first, and the questions I ask are in this order. How did you hear about us? Did someone recommend us? How can we help? It's just very open questions. The next one is, what is your main financial concern at the moment? That's an important one. Next up, have you worked with a financial advisor before? If so, how did that go? Another incredibly important one. what you're looking for in a financial advisor. And the next two questions or the next question is quite important. Do you currently have a written pound-specific financial life plan? We know the answer to that is going to be no. Some of them say, yeah, I've hobbled something together on Excel, but yeah, not too detailed. And then I put what are your hobbies, interests, or passions, again, just to get an idea for them. I then ask them a sort of financial planning question, again, so that I'm preparing them for what we're going to be doing. If you were to retire next month, approximately how much monthly income would you require to maintain a dignified and comfortable retirement? Assume your mortgage is cleared. Again, I want him to get a grasp of, £2,000 a month, £8,000 a month, £10,000 a month, or something like that. And then I ask them a couple of questions about where they live. I've got a disqualifier question actually on my discovery form, and this is what it is. How many personal finance / investment books have you read? None, 1, or 2+. 2+ is a huge red flag for me. So, yeah.
Why?
Because often it just is going to cause some problems in the relationship, potentially, from my experience.
They might have opinions and thoughts of their own, and we couldn't have that.
Yeah.
Often it's going to cause problems in the relationship, potentially. So often and potentially means this isn't really a disqualifier. It's just like if they
I'm really keen on that discovery form being filled in, and I won't have an initial meeting with the client unless they've filled that in. That's their first test of how engaged are they involved in this.
That's really important, Andy. We're the same. You don't fill it in, you ain't getting a meeting. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So very rarely do I have to send an email like the day before, like, please make sure you fill this in or we're not having the call tomorrow. So yeah, people are quite.
How long would you estimate it takes someone to complete that?
Very quick, Alan. I'll send a link to you. Sort of.
Right, what, like 10 minutes?
Less than that, 5 minutes.
And
it's beautiful. Fair. It's scrollable. It works on iPad and
that's fine, because I've heard of others. I mean, another friend of mine told me a story about trying to engage with a well-known financial advisor, and he was sent effectively quite a complex spreadsheet and asked to complete all the details, and he didn't even know how to do it.
We're trying to minimise the friction, but there's a healthy amount. There's a healthy amount of friction in the relationship. And the final point I'm going to say about the questions. Yeah, I've got the CEG questions. I've seen them. I've seen the sort of 7 sections. They're quite useful. If you are going to use questions in a meeting, I mean, it's easier on Zoom, but if you're ever going to use it in a meeting, I can't remember what consultant said this to me, but it was quite useful. He prints it out and has it on the table, and he says, he or she says, the advisor says, "Oh, just so you know, I've just got a list of interesting questions here." Like, you just call it out. I've got a list of interesting questions here, rather than just trying to pretend it's all natural. Okay, yeah, that's good. So, yeah, your relationship with money and your siblings, like looking, like, it will just look very unauthentic. So, just call it out and say, I've got a list of interesting questions here. I hope, is it okay?
I like that.
Them?
Yeah. I'm not going to answer. I'm not going to ask all of them, which is the other thing.
Because they look at it and go, Jesus Christ, you got 68 questions there, mate. Like, how long have we got? I've only got my lunchtime. So just calling it out is quite useful.
Guys, the chairman had some input there about 15 minutes ago. Nick, do you still have something to say?
No, I just want to say thanks, Carl, for that particularly loud cough. That was
which I apologise for.
You did, but I'm still going to dump you in it. I have a similar process to Mr. Hart. I don't have a superbly engineered website page, but I send prospects a Word document. It's 2 pages. On one page, I just ask for high-level financial, just so I got an idea where they are. I don't want to know who their pension providers are, what funds they're in. I just want to know roughly what assets they've got, what debts they've got, what mortgage, because some people, you're going to look at that and think, shit, I can't do anything for these people. So that's just the end of the day. And the second page is the more questions, the open questions. Why have you made contact with me? What are your concerns? Do you have any high-level aspirations? And people generally will open up with that, because I get that bad, but I don't book in the discovery meeting until that comes back. So I'm not chasing them ever the day before the meeting. The meeting does not, I say to them, I'll send this out to you, get it back to me. When it's back to me, then we'll do the discovery meeting. And because I've got that high-level financial information, I can then do, Armison's bucket. I've got enough to do a personalised bucket based on that Word document for them, which I either draw on the board behind me, or I've got a Google Slides and a PowerPoint style presentation, which I'll do for them as well. But because that information's come back to me, I could do a bucket that is about them. So there's no point in me doing a bucket with buy-to-lets on the outside of the bucket if they haven't got buy-to-lets. But if they've got a limited company, you do the factory icon or what have you, and that's how I do it. And I would say it probably takes people about 10, 15 minutes to fill out the Word document. But I think I get, and I mean, I love having hidden pages on my website if I want really detailed information on certain things, and I do use that. But I think the Word document is just kind of open. They can just fanny around with it as they want, as long as they get some idea of who they are before we have the first proper meeting with them. That's my process.
What we always do as well is, or what we have as part of the Getting to Know You form, the online questionnaire, is we have the first 2 parts of our compliance journey as well in there. So our terms of business document, and they have to tick a box to say that they've read it. And then our mumbo jumbo questionnaire next, so our risk profile questionnaires are in there as well. And we tend to almost always get those done at first hit. So it's a nice way of kind of just taking care of some initial stuff at the outset. Yeah,
that's interesting, because I'm totally polar opposite to that, and I give the terms of business, whatever we have to call it, the client agreement, I give it out at the last possible legal moment, because I don't, because that I might not be working with them by that. They might have binned me off. I might have binned them off by that stage, and I don't. The risk assessment questionnaire comes right at the end, because they have to have a bit of a bullying session from me where we talk about risk and what the real risk is. Yeah. I think if you give Joe Public a risk assessment questionnaire, they're going to answer it the way they think you want to. They give the answers they think you want to see, not the answers they need to be giving. So
that's interesting, Nick. So you have a conversation about risk versus volatility, and the biggest risk being running out of money and all that sort of thing. You pre-position it, or you educate them. Let's say you educate them before you ask them to fill this in.
I do the bucket, Alan. And I say, thanks. You told me, we think your lifestyle cost is $50,000. Yeah, you told me you want to be financially independent at this age. Chances are one of you is going to live for 3+ decades. That lifestyle cost, that stuff that's in your bucket, that's got to last you for 3+ decades. And the chances are the cost of your lifestyle is going to triple. So all we're trying to do when we do financial planning for people like you, good folk like you, is to minimize the chance of you running out of money before you run out of life, because that's the biggest risk. And how we're going to get you through this financially secure with a dignified independent retirement is by giving you portfolios chock full of the great companies of the world. Now that's going to be countercultural. You won't hear it, and blah blah blah. You know the lines, and then we go off that. And then if people then start resisting, say, "Well, I still don't want to go down I don't want that." Then okay, well then we probably can't work together. And and I haven't given them a risk assessment questionnaire. I haven't given them a compliance thing as yet. We haven't done any regulated advice. They've just disqualified themselves.
Yeah, I do like that. But just going back to the terms of business for a second, and back to something that Alan said to me years ago, to use the compliance as a positive, as a USP. So on our website, you can, if you go all the way down the bottom, you'll see terms of business, and we call it doing business with us. So that's our terms of business. We put loads of effort into that. I do think it's the best one in the market. I've said that before as well. So it's kind of, because it's a kind of a cool document that hopefully sets us apart. That's why we introduced it at the outset. The mumbo jumbo questionnaire, I just haven't found a good place to do that in the client journey. We just get it done early is kind of our view on that.
But if you do the mumbo jumbo questionnaire at the outset and it comes back, God forbid, I can feel Andy seething internally. I know your hand was raised, Andy. We'll come back to you. And they come back as a 4 out of 10 on the risk scale, and you're doing the cash flow, and it's painfully obvious that if you put them into the normal shit, actually really high risk. Yeah. To their financial health 4 out of 10 portfolio, they're going to run out of money. Then you have the conversation, and you.
So honestly, so our scores are out of 7, and 90% are either 4 or 5. Andy alluded to it in the last couple of episodes about like 100% equity funds coming in at 4 out of 7 at the moment, and all that kind of stuff. So you can kind of you can match stuff. So for us, it's like, does the recommendation match the financial plan? Is the client comfortable that these are long-term, blah, blah, blah? Can we match all of that around? Honestly, Nick, we don't. We have probably pre-qualifiers on our website, so we tend to get more high net worth people than not. So it tends not to be a big issue. That's not to say have we had a couple of issues. Of course we have. We just talk to the clients then. Great.
Andy, your hand was raised, mate. Have you still got something to say?
Yeah, just to follow off, close off my process. It's they contact me somehow, email, WhatsApp, something. I'll then send them my discovery form. They'll complete it. I'll then have the initial phone call, usually. After that, I'll send them a link that explains my fees and service. I send them another link that explains my investments, the Maven Invest portfolios. Then we have the strategy meeting where I build their financial master plan live with them. So at that point, we've gone through the discovery, initial phone call, sort of question, a meeting. They've got an idea about the fees, charges, structure, and process. They've got an idea about the investment portfolios that I manage as well. And then obviously the strategy meeting is building their financial plan. And after that, we do all the compliance regulation to get them onboarded as a new client. A little bit of a story about that. I'm taking on a client at the moment that's just got one investment company involved. I thought this was going to be a walk in the park. They completed my fact find with their address as they put an extra digit in the address. So basically, we copied that and put a letter of authority together to this new investment company trying to get the information back from them. And then also the client said, oh, by the way, my email address linked to that investment company is not the email address using at the moment. So the DocuSign needs to go to another email address. Fine. So it went to another email address, came back as an extra digit in it. We sent it off to the provider. 2 weeks later, they said, this is wrong. And they highlighted the address is wrong. I went on to Royal Mail, found the address, found the extra digit. I thought, sugar, this is a mistake I've done. Then I went to the fact find that they filled in and they put an extra. It's just a complete and utter faff. So you've got to get the right email address right for DocuSign linked to the certain company that's involved. You've got to obviously get the address right. That's like ridiculous. But it was 2 digits, but you put in 3 digits. It's very hard to spot. And
Did that ever happen to you, Alan?
Never.
So my assistant just copied it.
I don't even know what he's talking about.
No, you lost me. I drifted off 5 minutes ago.
Right. Okay. Anyway,
can we?
It does sound like a life. Like the kind of thing that, I mean, you know,
that's just typical.
How do you go on living when you go through that kind of experience? You know,
yeah,
I don't know. Anyway, I'm hanging in there. We're trying to get it sorted out. But financial advisors listening to this will get what I'm saying. You know, the wrong email address is linked to the DocuSign certificate, and it's just like, Jesus Christ, it's meant to be easy in 2023. Anyway, we play.
Mr. Chairman, I was just thinking, because Andy then started talking about what he refers to as his strategy meeting, which I think is the version that we call our blueprint meeting. In the interest of time, is that the one to carry forward for the next session and just begin? I
think that's one of your better ideas. Yes, let's do that. By the way, just for the dear Trappists listening, in the cough derby, it's now Heart 1, Widger 1. Thank you for that last interjection, Andy. That was good. Yeah, let's wrap.
There is a mute button, guys. You've got a mute button.
I thought I muted and unmuted at the right time. I obviously didn't. And I don't know if I'm delayed now.
It's easily done. It's like missing off a digit on a letter of authority, isn't it? It can be done. So let's do that. Let's wrap up the discovery section of the client journey. And in the next episode, which even my maths is telling me it should be episode 20, we'll move on to the strategy meeting, whatever you want to call it, the first planning meeting, how we do it. Because I think that's a really good point, because we talk about this, but a lot of this, when I talk to other advisors, what they want to know is how do you actually run your planning meetings? What goes on? So if we focus on the first strategy meeting, how we set it out, what we do beforehand, the parameters, the messages we're trying to get across to the client throughout that initial meeting. And yes, we can talk a bit about the tech, but I mean, that's not really the thing. Yeah, okay, let's do that. So if we're happy with that, gents, I think it's time for us to consider moving on to the next part of the show, and hopefully it's always there on time. There is Posty hauling the bulging sack of Trappist questions. Trappist, if you want to post a question to the Real Advisor podcast, please do so in the pinned tweet. There's a link. There's also a link in the show notes. It'll open up a Google form. Put your question in there. We are going through them as much as we can. We've got loads to catch up on. We really do appreciate your input. This is your show, and you shape it as much as we do. So let's have a look at the questions we've got here. Who's this one? Oh. Okay, this is from someone called Tom R. He's not on Twitter. Having trained with a restricted advice firm, what advice would you give someone who wanted to set up on their own? A one-man independent advice firm. Do you think it's necessary to gain experience within an independent firm first? I'll have a quick stab at that, if that's okay, guys, because one of the meaty potato subjects that wasn't discussed today, but was this thing about tied versus independent. So I would just go back to first principles, Tom R, and question whether you need to go independent. Easy to say, I suppose, because I'm not going to do it. But if I was starting out again today, I might well look at the restricted model. The only thing wrong with the restricted model is the horrible word restricted. It's a terrible adjective. If they called it focused, you can be independent or focused. That sounds far more attractive. I mean, restricted is awful. But most real financial advisors, in my experience, Tom, are restricted. Their trade appellation might say independent financial advisor, but they're all restricted. The real financial advisors will use one or two platforms. They'll have one or two investment partners. They'll have a process that all clients go through to get each unique client to their financial salvation. But it's this throwback to the days when we were product brokers, and I think the regulator still views us as product. All the regulations about the product all the time, isn't it? And that's why they put a lot of heat on it. So I would say if you're going out on your own, fine. There's no difference between independent and restricted. You might have to do some more compliance stuff as an independent, my friend. But I would just go back to first principles, as I said, and just say, you know what? Do I need to be independent? If it's that much more burdensome, and there are more compliance regulations being independent, then just think, you know what? Just think about going restricted, because most of us are in reality. Okay, guys.
But I'm gonna push back on that because of how you've described it. The restricted is restricted. If I was, and you're right, most of us, we do a whole market review and we identify the best platforms or investment solutions, and we tend to stick to those. And we are required to periodically review those. Every now and again, in my experience, we come across a client with a bag of spanners, as we call it, loads of kind of legacy investments. And if I'm restricted, I can't give any advice on those, whether to keep them, chuck them, do anything else.
Yeah, that's the bit. That's the bit I don't know how restricted.
And for me,
is that the case?
How can you advise on something? Restricted means you've got to call it focused, call it whatever you want. That's the only products and services upon which you are authorized to advise.
It means you can advise. Your recommendations are going to be restricted to a panel of products, but you can certainly comment on other people's products.
What do you do if someone comes to you with, I don't know, call it like a structured note from a discretionary manager that you surely are duty bound to say, I can't advise you. I can't advise you on that. I can't do anything with it. I can only advise you on this other range of products and services. I know that companies do have then outsourced services. I'll refer you on to our independent arm, for example, to do that. But I've just got this view on what the gold standard is for being a financial planner. And to me, there's a checklist of things. I know we've sort of debated it and discussed it in the past, but being financial planning led for certain, having a robust, sensible investment proposition that's defendable and evidence based, and so on. I obviously would say being a chartered firm is another tick in the box. And I would say being an independent is a tick in the box. Now, not everyone's going to agree with that, of course, and people who aren't those things we're not going to agree with it. But if I was starting from scratch and say I'm going to optimize, this is the optimal gold standard model, there's 5 or 6 key points, I would defend that all day long. Why would you not? I don't believe that the barriers to independent versus restricted are significantly bigger or greater. And yes, there is an extra bit of friction. Undoubtedly there is. But I want to be able to stand in front of my prospective client, my existing client, saying we're not only are we independently owned, we're not owned by third parties or banks or stockbrokers, anyone else pushing an agenda. And secondly, we are independent of thought, of mind, and we are not. We don't have a restricted range of products and services that we can offer to you. The reality is, in the UK, the vast majority of the big national brands are restricted, and I think that's a competitive advantage for the small independent boutique firms.
Andy, I saw your hammer straight. I will come on to you. I just think, because I'm going down this route of just simplifying everything, right? Really getting the essence of things. I don't want to be associated with. The whole product thing leaves me cold, and the independent thing is about product. I say to clients, I'm independent in the broadest sense, because as you do, Anna, I'm owned by nobody's got a share in my business. There's no bank or building society or insurance company prodding me to sell a particular brand of product. I am independent of mind, as you'll find out if you come on board with me. But this whole thing about focusing about the product is just drives me nuts. Andy.
I agree with both of you, but that's not my point. Tom,
indecisive.
Dave strikes again.
I'm gonna answer Tom's Question: set up on your own ASAP. If you're independent or restricted, it's irrelevant. It will be a tough journey, but in hindsight, it will be the best thing that you've ever done. So set up on your own ASAP. Don't sweat the
You
small
can
stuff.
join a network. You can be independent via a network, and there are some better than others.
Well, you can be independent or restricted via a network. So
Right,
yeah, the fact that he goes directly authorized or via a network again is a.
I would think it's been a long time since I did it. I think it'd be a tough gig. You guys have all done it. Set up as a sole trader advisor, going completely directly authorized and be responsible for your sort of relationship with the FCA. I'm not sure I would do that if I was starting tomorrow. I think I would, at least as a stepping stone, go via a better quality network,
yeah,
and then let them take care of all the junk and the liaison with the regulators.
That could be a key stepping stone. But yeah, in answer to his question, set up on your own ASAP. I don't think you need to spend time at an independent firm. I think it's if you spent X years at a restricted firm, you're ready to go on your own. If you spent X years at an independent firm, you're ready to go on your own. So yeah, if you think you're ready to go on your own,
Carl,
get out on your own.
Just to tie a bow on this particular point, Carl. No. My question is about, out of interest and for context for our audience, which is scattered around the globe. In Ireland, what's the split? And this is going to get you on the hop, and you might not even know the restricted versus the independent. What's the total split in terms of the number of advisors? Would you think in Ireland?
No idea. I would imagine because there was kind of loose regulation up till a few years ago, vast majority are fully authorized. So, but I don't know, so I can't.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the second question. There's a lot of paper in this envelope. I'm going to take about 2 or 3 breaths reading this out. This is from Gavin Burton, who's on Twitter as @Bertong1. Okay, chaps. Hello. I remain to be convinced about passive investing and EVI. Recently, the Retirementals podcast had a guest called Chris Hayes, who argued that passive investing does not influence the future of capital investment flows. Ooh, I'm lost already. I understand that you will argue this is an excuse for ESG investing and an excuse for active management. I also have my own reservations about ESG, and I'm sure Nick will concur. But I also believe there is systemic risk to passive investing. I might have a lie down. Please refer to Mike Green's comments the last 5 minutes on the Trigonometry podcast at the end of January, I think, which I'm sure Nick will be familiar with. Just quickly interjection here when I get my breath back. I do listen to Trigonometry. I can't believe I don't think I listened to that episode. Back with the question, page 17. He expressed real concern about the systemic risk of passive investing. Surely this is worth serious consideration. To not actively consider the fundamental allocation of capital seems to contradict the very nature of capitalism itself. Surely a time bomb in the making. Finished. Oh my God. Yeah. Okay. Long story short, there's no the passive side of things is passive investing.
This guy can't be an advisor.
Skewing the marketplace, basically.
I think he can't be an advisor. Is he an advisor?
Don't know.
I don't know.
That's a trigonometry. It's not as good as this podcast, but it's not bad. I did listen to that. Here's a couple of statistics to get your head around. First of all, we all assume that the rise of passive investing and it's kind of global, it's dominating, and the billions and trillions taken on by the Vanguards and BlackRocks and so on. Passive investing accounts, in terms of ETFs and actual funds, accounts for, guess how much? 16%.
Yeah.
So it's still a significant minority of the way the assets, institutional and retail assets, are managed That's the first point. And the second one is there is no such thing as passive anyway. We're all taking decisions at a high level about, geography or asset allocation.
The new inflows are astronomically weighted to the passive world. Yeah, total would be at 16%, but the new inflows, I believe, are way higher than 50%. So again, we don't quite know how this is going to play out. Over to you, Nick.
Okay, well, I think we've given that. Carl, anything to add to that? No, okay. Thank you, Gavin, for that.
But just to wrap this up, because I don't want to just brush it under the carpet. It's something that comes up on a regular basis. My take on the underlying, the investment strategy structure, call it passive, call it any variation on that. My view is it's far from perfect. It's not perfect at all. But to me, it's the least worst option, because if you follow what Gavin says, then that puts you in a corner and says, well, now you've got to go and select some active funds. You've got to go buy and sell. I don't know where to start with that because all the evidence is weighted against me in order to do that. So
you underestimate the power of the dark side.
It feels to me that whatever shade or variation of passive that you tend to employ is, it's the least bad option. It's the one that the science and the evidence would say your positive outcomes are more weighted. They're more likely to have a positive outcome at this moment in time. Maybe in 50 years or something, if it becomes a bigger thing and it goes from 16% to 36% or something. Yeah. But that in itself then creates more. But that creates more opportunities for active managers. If everyone is slavishly buying the market, then for sure there are some arbitrage opportunities. There are some sort of price seeking opportunities for active managers, and then the weight might fall back. But it tends to I just rely on the natural order of things, and passive investing or factor-based investing or evidence-based investing is the least bad option for me today.
The returns are generated. The returns are generated from the asset allocation, as we all know. Too much focus is on other sort of unimportant areas. So yeah, I call it asset class investing, and you're right, Alan. It's the least worst option, and it's the putting the building blocks together for being the wealth engine for the clients. In terms of arguing passive and active, I've not really had that debate for years. I'm sure you guys have moved on from it as well. But as I say, I prefer to go to an active advisor that's 100% global equities than a passive advisor that's 50-50. The 100% active equity portfolio, I think, is going to hammer the 50-50 passive. So again, the guns are facing the wrong direction, in my opinion. It's all about the asset allocation. Yes, we want to keep the fees down, but the asset allocation is going to move the needle far more than active versus passive, and also fees of the fund. So the asset allocation, I think, is absolutely central to all of this.
Just to close on this, I think we've all been through this journey, and where we initially were active fund pickers, and then we make this transition because we believe the evidence is overwhelming. You're better off just buying the broad market and just going with the flow. And of course, that's happened through our profession over the last 20 years. Do any of you guys know anybody who's done the sort of passive approach for, say, 15 years and then gone back to active? I don't know anybody. It really is once you make that change, it's very hard to see the compelling evidence for going back, and so hard that no one ever does it in our experience. Okay, let's move on to Culture Corner. Okay, so the first Culture Corner is a book, Just Ask by Graham Eisner.
Yes, that's from me. Graham Eisner he was the head or a senior person at Goldman Sachs and their wealth management division. And I can't remember the exact statistics, but he took their wealth advice arm, which obviously is dealing with super high net worth individuals, but really made a massive success and became, I think, their biggest revenue generator across the whole company, certainly in the UK. I spent some time with Graham, has done some training for us. His subject matter is all about referrals. We've talked about referral strategies on this podcast before. For most professional services, and particularly for financial planners, it remains the number one sort of opportunity to grow your business through word of mouth and having existing clients refer you to their friends, family, and connections. But no one in my experience has ever nailed this stuff. No one has got it right. No one has had that I've ever sort of met. Any listener, by all means, get in touch with us if you have nailed this. But a systemized, repeatable, scalable referral type structure model that is followed by everyone in your company and is generating great opportunities for your business week after week. Graham Eisner has kind of done that, and he's built it in clearly a legitimate and successful wealth management business at Goldman's. And he's written a book about it, and the book is Just Ask. And he unpacks the whole thing. There's 7 key components to it. It's a very readable book, just recently published. He's done some training for us in our firm. It's good. It's worthwhile. Buy the book. Link in the show notes.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Alan. The next 2 are from me, and these might, at first listening, seem you might be asking what on earth have they got to do with financial services? But the first book that I've just finished reading is The Bet, quite a well-known book. Paul Ehrlich, Julian Simon, and Our Gamble Over the Earth's Future. So Paul Ehrlich wrote The Population Time Bomb in 1968 or 69, said that millions and millions and millions of people will be dead by the end of the 1970s through famine. There's just too many people on the planet. Paul Ehrlich is still alive. He's been wrong about pretty much everything. He's one of these Malthusian prognosticators of doom. He's loved by the New York Times and the Guardian. And this guy, Julian Simon, in the 70s said, okay, let's have a bet, Paul Ehrlich. You think everything's going to hell in a handbasket, that we're going to run out of commodities and food. And they picked up 5 or 6 commodities, silver, metals, whatever, iron, and said copper, and said, okay, by the end of the decade, will these things cost more or less? And by the end of the 1980s, and Julian Simon said they're going to cost less. Paul Ehrlich said, no, they're going to be way more. And Julian Simon won this bet between them. It's kind of, but it's just this ongoing thing that we have to be optimistic about the future, because we have to be a fountain of optimism for our clients, right? You cannot be a successful investor if you're a pessimist. It just cannot be done. And the book's really entertaining. It sounds quite dry, but it's quite good. And it's funny. By the end of their lives, because Julian Simon has passed away, there were these 2 academics who were just bitching at each other in their papers and so forth. It's just super bright people.
Sounds like the Trap Pack.
Well, I don't know if it ever came over to your over the Irish Sea, but in the 90s there was a show in this country called the Newman and Baddiel show. They're kind of rock star comedians at the time before they fell out. But they had a skit with these 2 academics who would go on stage, the sort of crusty historians. And it would all be very serious. They'd be talking about some subject, and then one of them would take a perceived slight, and they just start. They go, you know that tramp that lives near you under the railway bridge who smells of wee-wee? I am familiar with that person. That's your best ever girlfriend, that is. And this is what this Paul Ehrlich and Paul Simon thing really is. Anyway, so that's just an interesting. Yeah, that's just an interesting book. But the second book is very similar. So James Dyson, his book is called Invention. Obviously, the invention of the Dyson. You can't call it a Hoover because that's the whole point of it, but you know what I mean. Fantastic British engineer. It took him 5,127 iterations of his Cyclone engine to get the thing working. He was almost broke. He's an engineer in a country that seems to now despise engineering. He's got a great tale in there about building the ventilators for the lockdown bedwetting episode, and how the civil service just don't have a clue and change the rationale almost daily for 6 weeks before telling him not to bother. But I'll close with a comment from his wife, who says optimism has to be the most loving and supportive attribute that James has. He doesn't just hope for the best. He simply believes that everything will work out. And again, it's tying into this thing, as financial advisors, our clients are bombarded with negativity all the time. Everything is worse than it ever was before. We've got to be that well that they can draw on for optimism. We have to remain optimistic and give some of that to our clients. And those 2 books, just, Ehrlich is wrong about everything. James Dyson, just crack on. Version 5,126 didn't work. Let's try version 1. Oh, now it works. And now I'm a multi-millionaire. And now I'm doing all kinds of things like opening up universities and encouraging engineering in this country. Just a great guy. Mr. Widger on Healing with Brendan Ring.
Yeah, On Healing is a podcast hosted by a girl called Olivia Hunt. And basically she talks to kind of people who have... I suppose had some bereavement throughout their lives or whatever, right? And the reason I mentioned this one is Brendan Ring is a friend of mine. He's a client of mine, and he lost his daughter, Cleana. And you probably have all heard me talk about Cleana's Foundation, and we do a lot of support work for that. Anyway, listen to the podcast, because we've all often said it to each other about how lucky we are, and we all then 5 minutes later take it for granted. And we all need reminders all of the time. And listen to the podcast and listen to what Brendan has been through, but listen to what, a little bit like what you're saying, Nick, what he turned it into. He turned it into this thing. It's going to be himself and Terry, his wife. This is going to be a force for good in the memory of Cleana. It's an inspirational podcast. Olivia does a great job in talking to Brendan, because I know Brendan wasn't very comfortable going in to do the podcast. Please, everybody, have a listen and then realize after you've finished it how lucky you actually are.
Wow. Brilliant. Thanks, Carl. I will do that, certainly. And Mr. Hart, you have a culture corner for Michael Lewis.
Yeah, Michael Lewis is a famous author from the US. He has a podcast. It's got 3 seasons. It's absolutely awesome. I listened to 2 seasons years ago, and then the 3rd season only recently, so that's why I put it on the Culture Corner. His podcast is via the Pushkin sort of network, which is Malcolm Gladwell's podcast network. It's called Against the Rules by Michael Lewis. He's written books such as The Undoing Project, which is his latest one. His famous one was Liar's Poker, Flash Boys, superb at sort of narrative and stories. And the 3 series that he's got, or 3 seasons that he's got against the rules. The first season is all about the roles that referees play in sort of life in America. Season 2 is all about coaches, and season 3 is all about experts. It is absolutely awesome. So if you're into your podcast, into good stories, the Michael Lewis Against the Rules podcast is a massive, strong recommendation from me.
I agree. I've listened to the first 2 seasons. I didn't know he had a 3rd season.
Yeah. That's I didn't realize.
Brilliant storyteller. I think I've read all, if not most, of his books. I just love the way. He's ex, I think Salomon Brothers trader, wasn't he? So he knows all about the sort of financial world. Hasn't he got a book out now about the whole kind of COVID? As Nick reversed the bedwetting episode. No, I think he has, or he's about to have.
I think the one he's working on is the crypto mess of FTX. So he's involved in that. So he's going to talk about the whole rise of the whole crypto world and when it sort of happened and the story behind it. So that's going to be pretty awesome when that comes out. That's the latest book he's working on.
That book is going to be amazing, and that Netflix series is going to be amazing. Like what those dudes and girls were doing was off the wall stuff.
But he's tracking it back to its origins and the whole reason why this has all happened and stuff. And he's going to tell it in an amazing story. He's actually got some sort of behind the scenes on the latest Against the Rules podcast. Again, he explains to you how he puts his stories together and stuff. It's really, really,
Well, that's in the podcast.
That's in the podcast, and Against the Rules, he talks about so to study a subject, he learns around the subject, and he knows that he's not going to use any of that in the book, but he just needs to get closer to the subject. So he talks about this whole sort of process of putting stories together. It is awesome. Yeah, check it out.
Very good. Yeah, there's that famous picture, isn't there, of Tony Blair and Bill Clinton and Sam Bankman-Fried on the stage. It's hard to work out who's the biggest criminal. Okay.
No.
I think that's it, isn't it? I think we're there for it's Christ Almighty. It's bank holiday, and we're an hour and a half into this. Wow. Yeah. Wow. Thanks very much, Trappists, for your.
It's not a bank holiday in Ireland.
Okay. Well, every day's a holiday. No, I'm not going. So that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you, dear Trappists, for your precious time and your input into the show. Rate us and leave us a 6 out of 5 star review on iTunes. We do love them. We love the kind remarks. It gives us some just amazing Phillips. Of course, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. But until the next time, from the Trap Pack, it's adios and take care out there, folks. Goodbye.
Cheerio.
Bye-bye.